I do want to say that I'm really thrilled to get to be in this position tonight. I think it was really lovely of Ross to give me this opportunity. I'm sorry that he got sick, although, yeah, you want me to be in more in the mic? Yes, because Ross is a little under the weather, so please remember him, and please remember Gina, who is taking care of Ross when he's a little under the weather. I speak this as a husband of many years and know what a joy I am whenever I am sick, and how much Becky always appreciates the way I behave when I'm not well. So I'm thankful tonight to get to be here with you and to speak about Ruth for a couple of reasons. One of them is that last week we looked at the messiest book of the Bible, and it's followed by what may be the sweetest book in the Bible. It is a love story, although not a Hallmark story, but nonetheless, there's a love story here and more than one. And also I'm delighted because it only has 4 chapters. Unlike the vast majority of the books that we've read and studied up to this point, like Genesis, which has 50, I got 4 chapters. How long can this take? That's a rhetorical question. Don't get carried away with it. So we think that Samuel is the author of the book. Nobody's really completely sure. It was not Ruth, as happens most of the time in the Bible. When a book is named after someone, it doesn't mean that they wrote it. It just means it's about them. But it's about more than Ruth. The really great thing is the Book of Ruth starts out really tough with sadness and loss and displacement. And it ends up really great. But the passage there is not always easy. And isn't this a great life lesson for all of us? That when we're in a rough patch, hang in there, know that God is still active in our lives, and He's going to get us to the end. And when we get to the end, we'll say, oh, well, this was actually worth it. But when we're in the middle, it's hard to be that optimistic about it. So the book of Judges shows that this is a wild and unrepentant and unrighteous time in history. Ruth gives us some balance. Your Hebrew lesson of the week is the word hesed. And I'm really sorry that Ross wasn't here to hear me pronounce that, because I'm never really sure if I pronounce these words right, because I didn't take Hebrew like he did. So I love it when I mispronounce something and he very gently says it the right way, and I go, oh yeah, okay, that's the way it works. So hopefully I got that right. It's a short word, so the odds are good. It does not have a simple English equivalent. It does not mean love, like hesed is the Hebrew word for love. It is an action word. It is performed for the benefit of something who is in desperate need. And this flows from power to the powerless, a voluntary act of extraordinary mercy or generosity. We will see hesed demonstrated often in the book of Ruth. At the very beginning of Ruth, it's kind of designed like a play. At the very beginning, there's a prologue, and we find out that there was a famine in the land. And this phrase, the famine in the land, is only used a couple of times in the Old Testament. So this is a particular type of famine and may indicate not just that it was one of those happenstance things, but there was some spiritual turmoil going on that happened to be involved in it. For whatever reason, we have Naomi and her husband Elimelech. Naomi means pleasant and beautiful and good. Elimelech means my God is king. And yet, this is one of the little interesting things about Ruth, they moved from Bethlehem, the house of bread, to a place next door in Moab, because Bethlehem doesn't have bread then. There's a famine in the land. So they move next door. Well, the place they move is not a good place. Remember that some of the traditional enemies of Israel include, but are not limited to, the Moabites and the Ammonites. Why those particular ones? Well, it's because the Hebrews looked down their noses at the Moabites, and they should, because they had a really sketchy start. Do you remember? And this is the only icky thing in here, and it's inferred more than it's actually told. Do you remember where the Moabites and the Ammonites came from? Remember back to Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis. We studied about that several weeks ago, remember? And Lot's family gets out, and his wife turns into a pillar of salt. And his daughters think, apparently, that there's no men left in the world except Dad. And they think, well, if we're going to have children, he's the only one we got. So they get him drunk, and they get pregnant. That's where those two nations came from. This is why the Jews kind of look down on them, because it's icky, okay? It's incest, which happens a fair amount in the Old Testament, and it's never pretty. So Ruth is from this land. They worship a god named Shamash, not Yahweh. And so here Naomi and Elimelech go into this land next door that is a foreign land, that is a pagan land, that worships a pagan god. And they live there for a while. Elimelech dies, but they have two sons, and they get married to Orpah and Ruth. And then after 10 years, they die too. And they don't have any kids. So Naomi now is in a situation. Because remember, at this time in history, women had to have a man to take care of them. And therefore, if you had no husband, if you were a widow, you needed sons to take care of you. When there's no sons, then you're in trouble. So Naomi feels like she has no other options except to go back home, and everybody go, "Hey, where's Elimelech? Where are the boys?" And she'll have to go through all of this with them. But what else can she do? So they take off for Bethlehem, and along the way, she tells her daughters-in-law, because this is a gracious thing that she does to them, and they apparently love her. And she said, "Look, you're young, you're pretty, you're widowed, yes, but you can still find a man, and you'll have somebody take care of you. So go back home to your families, and it'll be fine." They don't want to do that. They kind of argue about it. They go a little further, and finally Orpah decides, okay, I guess I'll go home. And she hugs Naomi, and they cry, and she leaves. And Naomi turns to Ruth and says, "Well, aren't you going to leave too?" And she says, "No." And she tells her that she will stay with her. And this passage is so beautiful that often it gets used in weddings. It was not originally from a story of a love between a man and a woman. It is the love between Ruth and her mother-in-law. Think about that for a moment. How many of you would say these lovely, lovely words to your mother-in-law? Those of us whose mothers-in-law are passed into glory, think back at the time, you know those times, and how would you have said these kind things to her? Probably not. We'd all like to believe we would. We are Christians after all, but let's be honest. So here we have Ruth goes to Naomi and says, "I'm going to go with you. I'll live where you live. I'll die where you die. I'll be buried with your people. Your God is my God." So see, something has happened. Even though they went to a foreign land full of foreigners and unrighteous people, somewhere along the line, Ruth figured out the truth. So that's one of the love stories you see, because Ruth has learned to love the Lord and not to trust Shamash, some silly idol, but to trust the one true God. So they go back to Bethlehem, and Naomi is really sad and unhappy about this. And she tells all of her friends, "Don't call me Naomi anymore, call me Mara," which means bitter. And if you've had catastrophic losses, you might understand that. And all of us have or will have catastrophic losses. And when that happens, it's pretty hard not to take it personally and not to be bitter. That's what Naomi is now. And then she finds out that there is a relative of Elimelech who is still in the land. His name is Boaz. Now, the interesting thing about Boaz is that he has kind of a sketchy background too. His mom was prominently featured in a book that we looked at a couple of weeks ago. His mom was Rahab. Remember her? Business lady. She was in the private industry sector, and from Jericho, and some would say she had the world's oldest profession, but that's not true. The world's oldest profession is gardener. The other profession might be in the top 10, but gardener. That was our first job. So he didn't have a lot of heirs. He's a nice guy. He's probably, middle-aged or so. We get the feeling that he's kind of been around the block. He's got a good amount of money. He's got land and all, and he's related to Elimelech. This could be a great thing, because they already have all those rules and regulations that we arduously poured through in Numbers and Leviticus and Deuteronomy about who has to do what for when and where. And one of those things was, if your brother dies, then your widow has to marry the next down brother and have a child, and that child would not be the child of the brother that was still alive, but the brother that was dead, so that the line would go forward, right? And we all keep our own land. So that's at play here too. All right, so Boaz goes out to his field. He welcomes the guy, says, "May the Lord bless us today." I mean, he's got a great attitude, doesn't he? And he notices Ruth, and we don't know. We assume from that she was probably attractive, but also because here's this woman that is new to town. She's from another country that they don't usually associate with. But everybody's heard the story. Bethlehem's a small town. You know how small towns are. People talk. Naomi's home. She brought Ruth with her. So how's Naomi going to eat? She's got no way except Ruth. And it just happens to be one of those wonderful coincidences we call providential in the Bible. Just happens to be the season for gleaning. And here's the rule to help the poor people out. They didn't glean all the way to the edge of the field. They left the outer edges for poor people who could go there and gather and get whatever they could, which is a nice system, right? So she goes gathering, and she's not asked for special favors because she's related to a relative of Boaz. She just wants to get some food, and he notices her. And he knows that she's doing this to help out her mother-in-law, which was a pretty rare thing, even in those days. And so he decides to help her out a little bit, doesn't he? He invites her to not just glean the edges, but to join his other workers and to hang around with the women workers and stay away from the boys. And he tells the boys, "You leave Ruth alone," because Boaz may not be married, but he's not a fool. And so he tells them, y'all stay away. This is a righteous woman. So she's out there working, and she's gleaning like mad. And Boaz is really impressed by her, and then he offers her a meal. Now, this is pretty interesting, because in the Middle East, even to this day, to be invited to eat with somebody is to be invited to be a member of their family. Even someone who's going to kill you after the meal, like if you're, enemies of each other, while you're eating, everybody's safe. All the knives stay hidden. It's still that way in the Middle East. And they share the meal together, and it bonds them. So for him to treat her like a family member when she is a Moabite, when she is a widow, when she is poor, and he is an Israelite and he is not poor, this is the radical inclusion of the gospel echoed in this story, isn't it? So he treats her with compassion and with generosity, but never uses this as leverage against her. He does not sexually harass her. This reflects the radical extravagance of the gospel. By law, again, she was only allowed to glean on the edges, but he invites her into the middle of the field. That's the radical glory of the gospel. And then we see the radical transformation of the gospel as Ruth is transformed into a follower of God, and Naomi is transformed into somebody who's starting to trust the Lord again. She's starting to believe that it's not all over for her, that God has not forgotten her or abandoned her just because she moved next door to the Badlands. He still loves her. He still cares for her. So Naomi evaluates the meeting between Boaz and Ruth. She has threshed enough to feed the two women for more than a week. I'll spare you the math. Becky double-checked me on this, but it was a bunch of food. And she has 6 more weeks of threshing left to go. So she has been saved from starvation. she might be able to save enough food that they could eat for months and months and months, which is terrific because up to this point they had no way of eating, period. So Naomi tells Ruth to dress in such a manner that shows that her period of mourning is over, and she is available and serious about the possibility of marriage. Now, courting in those days was a little different than it is these days, and I've had people that argued until they were blue in the face that what was going on here was a lot more sordid than what I just described. And they looked at that and said, yeah, cover your feet with and we know what feet are in the Bible and all that kind of stuff. And that could be. But you know what? I don't think so, because that goes against the kind of righteous person that Boaz is and the kind of righteous person that Ruth is. This is not some sort of little, hey, baby, let me lay down you next to the threshing floor and let's see what happens. These are not two grubby teenagers. These are grown people. And they obviously get along well, and he sees that she has a need. She needs somebody to take care of her and her mama-in-law. But she is still putting herself in a vulnerable position, isn't she? This is a dangerous thing. This is a trusting thing that she is doing. Because if it goes wrong, it'll go very wrong. It'll go very bad. But she believes that Boaz is the man that he seems to be. And happily enough, it turns out that he is the man that she thought he was. He is a godly man and agrees to be Ruth's redeemer kinsman. It is kind of a provocative scene, a little saucy if you read it, but the narrator consistently depicts Ruth and Boaz as people of unmatched integrity. Loyalty and love are at the heart of their actions. So now we move to Act 4. This is the big climax. Boaz goes to the town gate. Boaz is a type of Christ, isn't he? A real historical person, an ancestor of Jesus, who is a symbolic foreshadow of Jesus. He protects Ruth's reputation. He finishes the job. He takes care of business. He follows through. Now there is one other kinsman who could be a redeemer. And Boaz, to be fair, says, okay, let me tell you, you have first call. And at first, the guy's interested because he's going to get some land. But then he realizes that it comes with baggage. And the baggage is Naomi and Ruth. So if he wants the land, he has to take in Ruth and marry her and have a baby with her, and that baby counts as husband number one's kid, not his. Now, he's still going to have to feed the kid. He's still going to have to raise the kid. He's going to have to take him to Little League and all that stuff. But it's not going to be his kid. The kinsman redeemer respectfully decides not to take advantage of this offer, and he says, no, Boaz, it's all yours. Now, interestingly enough, we have a lot of names of people in this story, but we don't have that guy's name, do we? Because he turned the situation down. He had an opportunity to do the right thing, and he did not take advantage of that opportunity. And we don't know his name. But everybody else, everybody who's a stand-up guy or a stand-up girl, we know their names. So, Boaz takes the sandal and all that, buys the land from Naomi and Ruth, gains Ruth as a wife. She is fully integrated into Bethlehem society and into Judah, is no longer a foreigner. She is now loved. She is now accepted. And I can tell you this, a little aside here, a little personal aside. I know what it's like to come from a different place and come to a little town where everybody knows everybody and have to figure out your place. Because I did that a very long time ago when Becky and I were in college. She was very young at the time. And after we got married, I found out that I was related by marriage to about a third of the people in Pike County. Lots of families. And I thought, this is a dangerous situation. I've got to watch what I say. I was kind of a big mouth. I know it's hard to believe. And I thought, I better not badmouth anybody because they might be kin and they might come and have a few words to say to me about it. So this wonderful situation that's happening with Ruth, I get it, don't you? Welcome to the community. We love you. Stay. She has the baby. Naomi's friends all say, now you have someone to take care of you. Now you have a son, And who does the son turn out to be? Oh, that's the cool thing. Their son's name is Obed. I know, not a name we use a lot now. Ruth, yes. Naomi occasionally. Boaz, not so much. Obed, never. But whose son will be of Obed? Jesse. And his son is David. So Ruth, the Moabitess, becomes the great-grandmother of King David of Israel, the greatest king in the history. And of course, his great-great-grandmother was Rahab, the lady from Jericho. So this is, when we get to Matthew, it's a lot of fun to look at the genealogy. I know you think genealogies aren't much fun, but that one has lots of little interesting Easter eggs in it, and here's one of them. Ruth and Rahab are going to show up again. So what do we learn from all of this? Well, we learned that, let's recap first. We have Ruth the Moabite, who is redeemed by Boaz, the son of Rahab the prostitute of Jericho, who was redeemed by God as surely as Ruth was. What does that teach us thousands of years later? There is no sin so great that God cannot forgive, no brokenness so deep that God cannot redeem, no sinner, no failure, no victim, no outsider so far gone that the sovereign hand of the Lord cannot reach out and rescue and revise the story of their life. Jesus' genealogy shows us that God can and will redeem anyone. So, here's our theological thoughts for this evening. God cares for us all, even the weak and seemingly powerless. In fact, if we look at how Jesus talks, it seems he has a special spot in his heart for the powerless and the weak. His mercy extends to all who request it, but it's not limited by human emotion. And God never abandons those who rely on him. That we can carry with us for the rest of our lives as well. So, your discussion questions. See, I have discussion questions too. How do we exhibit hesed? How do we exhibit to those who are desperately in need of assistance without being the arrogant, ugly Americans that we can sometimes be, and upholding their dignity? How do we help people who need stuff without making it seem like, we're here to fix you. We're here to save your life. You may show your appreciation any way we want to. That's not the way we want to do it. Do you remember there was a thing about 20 years or so ago called Secret Acts of Kindness? And the idea was that you snuck out in the middle of the night and mowed your neighbor's lawn because they couldn't mow the lawn because one of the members of the family was going to chemo every day. And you did it when they wouldn't hear you do it also. That was part of it. And they'd just come back in their lawn and be mowed. And you would never take credit for it. Isn't that a lovely idea? Very Christ-like thing, isn't it? So, since the nation of Israel was falling further from the Lord, does the story of Ruth and Boaz remind us of how God always maintains a remnant of the faithful? And finally, how is Boaz a type of Jesus and is Ruth a type of Mary? So, take a few moments, chit-chat around your table. You guys think you can get enough discussion going? I mean, I know you've got a huge table full of people there, so do the best you can. So all of you who saw fit to sit at really busy tables, this is your time, all right? So take a look at those, think about them, and I'll give you a couple minutes, and then you bring those ideas back. Okay, so this is great. I got to say, the difference between watching all of you guys have discussions around your table and the people I usually see having discussions at this other place that I go to work, where they have people that are college students for the most part, what a difference. Because I see you actually talking to each other face to face instead of doing this. Ooh, got another post on Instagram. So I'm hoping that you had some very cool insights that you came up with, because I see a lot of hand gesturing and people double checking their Bible. That's awesome. Okay, so how do we exhibit hesed, this act of love to help people out who are in desperate need? Any thoughts? Excellent.
And Stacy said, look out, stop looking in.
Very good. Did you guys hear that? Be intentional and don't be wrapped in this way. Look out and look at need wherever it might be. Even people that aren't close to you, look beyond them and think, who do I see that might be in a situation? Nice, good. Thank you. Anybody else? Those are pretty good places to start, right? This is what, to me, this is one of the things that I like so much about this church, is that we are missional. That is to say, we don't just guard this is one of my favorite sayings, is that we are called to be fishers of men, not gardeners of the aquarium. And there's so many churches, and I won't name them, that are very much into making sure that nothing gets out of the aquarium. So looking outward is a critical component of being mission-minded, whether it's here at home, whether it's across the town or across the state or across the world. That's critical. Thank you. Good. Anybody else want to elaborate on that? Okay, so yes.
I think too, if we do it that way, that we're not looking for a pat on the back. If we do it because we have the love of God inside and we want to share.
Right. It's all about the right motivation, isn't it? That we're not doing this so people will say, oh, what a righteous person you are. Heck, it's even better if they don't even know we did it, as long as it got done. Yeah. Isn't that what Jesus did? He said, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. To care for other people and to love them. And don't be like the Pharisees, who want to make sure that everybody knows they're doing the right stuff. You know, one of my favorite stories about the Pharisees is that there was actually a type of Pharisee called the bruised head Pharisee. And the bruised head Pharisee, this is true, they didn't want to be tempted by beautiful women, so they walked with their head down like this, because apparently they thought there were no tiny beautiful women. And they would walk until they hit a wall. And so part of their badge of honor was a nice bruised forehead. You'll notice not bruises there. But what a pretentious thing that is, right? So we don't want to be pretentious. We want to be conscientious. Whew. I love it when a rhyme comes together. All right. How do we do that with allowing their dignity? How do we live out this hesed and do it in such a way that doesn't make them feel like, oh, here they come to save us again? That's the tricky thing, isn't it? Like you were saying. Yes. Did you have something, Danny? You kind of looked like you were ready. No. Okay.
I think it's part of it is we've seen this many times when we go on mission, especially with our close mission partners that we go to time and time again. Mexico's one of those. Costa Rica's another. They could easily look at us and say, oh no, here come the Americans again. What new ideas are they bringing and what money are they bringing to overload us with? But it's all in the intentional attitude that you go there. If you're truly going with your eyes open to see the needs and then listen to what the leaders there need from you, that's a whole other conversation than just showing up and say, here we are, tell us what to do, we'll go do it.
Yeah. Can everybody hear that? Bart does have a nice voice that carries very well. Okay.
Brought up mission. When you go on a mission to a place like Mexico, people can't get over the fact that you came here to talk to them about Jesus.
Yes.
They're amazed that you would do that because they live a life that's very full.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned about going on trips is that if you go the first time, they're pleased to meet you. But if you go 2 or 3 times or more, then they learn to love you because they realize you love them. That you didn't just come down as a tourist, as a Christian tourist, to see their cool country and visit all their shrines and museums and stuff, and check that off your list and, well, okay, I wonder where we'll go next time on a mission trip. But instead, you're coming because you care about them. That's what makes the difference, isn't it? Okay, good. So does the story of Ruth and Boaz kind of encourage us that, and this is a leading question, isn't it? You're never supposed to use these. Does it encourage us because sometimes we feel like Elijah, that I'm the only one left standing, and then God says, oh, no, there's always a remnant. This book encourages me a little bit, especially after going through all the ickiness of Judges, that even at that time with all the horror that's going on and all the misery and all the lousy leaders and stuff, in Bethlehem, there are still people that are righteous. So don't get too discouraged when we hear terrible statistics, not that they're not serious, not that we shouldn't be concerned about them, but don't be overwhelmed by it, because God does not allow his faith to go away. We may not be the majority, and it might have been an illusion that we were the majority. Some of us who were born in the 50s grew up at a time when everybody went to church, unless you were Jewish and you went to synagogue. But you went to one or the other. And did that make everybody Christian? As Billy Graham once famously said, going to church doesn't make you Christian any more than going to a garage makes you a car. So it's what you do while you're there, isn't it? It's what you gain from it. So do you see Boaz as kind of a Christ-like person? And is Ruth a little like Mary? Okay, the baby thing was very different, but is she kind of a Mary in that she is righteous and God uses her to accomplish stuff that certainly seemed impossible to Naomi at first, that they were ever going to survive. So, did anybody else have any other things that you started to discuss? I saw lots of very animated discussions going on around. So was there anything else anybody talked about that you wanted to share with the rest of us? Okay. Doing good without getting credit for it. Absolutely. I think that's really the only way it really is good, isn't it? Because it's like Jesus said, if everybody knows you're doing something good and they all go, oh, way to go, you've got your clap on the back and that's all you get. But if you do something and nobody knows it except Jesus, isn't that lovely and wonderful to know that you have a secret that you share with Jesus, that he knows you did something kind to somebody and nobody else knows it but you and him. What a cool thing that is. What a great God that we follow. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Well, it is not quite 7. So let's just pray. You guys have anything else at the big kid table? Okay. All right. Let's pray. Father, thank you tonight for reminding us that even in the midst of all that was going on in the era of the Judges, that there were still righteous people, and they still behaved in a manner that honored you and that honored each other. And help us in these days when everything seems to be crazy, when you can't even get the government to decide on how many different genders we now have, or even if gender is an official word to use anymore, that your word does not change and that you do not change. And we can trust that, and we can live in that, and we can carry that truth to others. Give us those opportunities, Lord, and give us the words to say. In your name we pray. Amen.